Welcome to our AI in Practice webinar for November, focusing on our use case showcase. We're really excited to share some examples of how faculty and staff from our partner universities are using AI in their everyday practice and what other case studies they've been experiencing in their work. Just a quick reminder that we are recording this session and it will be sent out via email to the emails you use to register for the webinar afterwards. We are going to start using our chat for the first little kind of opening activity, but further on in the webinar, we ask that you use the Q&A feature to ask our speakers any questions. So to start things off, we want to think about a use case. We have some things that might seem obvious, but others that might be a little bit more unique and creative. So to kind of get those ideas rolling, in the chat, which should be enabled now, can you list, let's do about a minute, list as many use cases as you can for the object on the screen. Some? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So looking at what we see in the chat here, we are going to kind of we see some of the more blatant examples. So, transporting, getting yourself from point A to point B. But we see some other things. There's another use case for a vehicle, such as a place for rest or for advertising or for making a statement about yourself or making a profit, things of that sort. So this activity, this quick little example, was to kind of set the stage for thinking differently about this object. So thinking differently about generative AI tools. We've heard of a lot of different examples in the news, in the media over the last couple of years, and thinking about, well, when or how can we take it to the next step? What can we do a little bit differently? How can we use them in ways we don't necessarily expect? So today we're really excited to have this use case showcase of lightning rounds. We have 5 experts on generative AI in the faculty and entrepreneurial experience. So staff members from our universities working in the entrepreneurial centers. We have a strict format. We're going to be doing 10-minute rounds per presenter. And then they'll speak for about 5-ish minutes, and then we'll have some Q&A directly after for each speaker. We'll move through those 5 rounds so that we are getting some maximum use case exposure, making sure that we are providing you all with a variety of different things to try. And so to start us off, we are going to go in order of starting with our speaker from UMBC, moving to speakers from Johns Hopkins University, and then ending with the University of Baltimore. So without further ado, we are going to start with John.
All right, challenge accepted, Julia. So 5 to 6 minutes. We're going to do this a lightning round. My first slide here has a picture of a landscape here that tells you about AI in that it's peaks and valleys. So this is Ethan Mollick talking about peaks and valleys with AI. It does some things good, some things not so good. Next slide. So I want to encourage you as I start to ask 2 questions. How might I use Gen AI to do whatever is your use case in your workflow? And secondly, ask yourself, I wonder if Gen AI can do whatever. And I encourage you whenever you're using these models to try to break them. See how can it do this? Can it do that? Where does it do good things or not so good things based on your use case, your workflow? Next slide. A couple other points. Good iterative prompting matters when you use these models. So for example, a bad prompt might be write a lecture on Affordable Care Act, right? Very broad. It doesn't kind of know what to do. So I encourage you to look for what we call prompting frames. A real simple one is role task format. So you're saying, hey, I want you to act like a university researcher. I want you to analyze these themes, and I want you to output it as a Word document. So look for things called prompt frames that help guide you in your prompting. Next slide. I also encourage you, again, I'm a faculty member, so my use cases have to do with what it's like in my role as a faculty member. So I want you to think as a faculty member to connect to prior learning. Like, let's not forget pedagogical principles. Generative AI is a tool, it's an augmentation, so that learning principles include connecting to prior learning. What do your learners already know? And also make it meaningful to your learners. So in generative AI can help you with these things, but let's not forget our basic pedagogical principles. Next slide. So on to my use cases. First is I encourage you to add generative AI bookmarks to your toolbar. So reduce the barrier for use of these tools. So have it on your search bar. So you can flip to ChatGPT, you can flip to, I use Perplexity AI a lot. So you see those on my toolbar. That way I'm not having resistance like, oh, I gotta go open this up and sign in. So I encourage you to do that. Next slide. So my next use case is to apply generative AI to innovative data sources. So for this example, I'm teaching a graduate research methods class. My learning objective is to improve specific AIM writing skills of my students. So that's for them as they're writing grant applications, what it is that they're trying to get funding for. So a great source for this is the NIH Reporter Database. So this is a database of funded grants that NIH has. So I use that as a source for using generative AI. So next slide. So what I do is I go into that database and I search on specific aims, dementia, and technology. And from that, I get a bunch of grants that have specific aims. I take those specific aims out of the NIH database, put them into a Word document. So now I have specific aims that have been funded by NIH from across dementia and technology. So now I have an innovative data source. So the next slide. So now what I do is I put that into a large language model, and then here's my prompt. I say, act like an expert with 20 years experience writing a funded NIH grant applications. First, review the attached document of successfully funded grants and specific aims. Second, examine the specific aims and look for patterns in their structure and construction. Third, analyze these patterns and suggest specific ways to improve writing new specific aims by new investigators who've never written a specific aim. In your response, use examples of dementia and technology. Take your time and be relatively concise. Before you start, what else do you need to know to do an excellent job? So I'm again prompting that model. So next slide. So here you see the output. So then it's giving me kind of an analysis of these specific aims. I'm going to move on to my next slide. It also pulls out actual references from the grants that were funded. So I see real person's grant aims here. So then again, it's real data. Next slide. So I'm going to next move to my next use case is using Google Notebook LM, which is another large language model, as a study partner. So here I'm having students upload documents. So next slide. And here's a prompt where I'm asking it to act like a college professor. And this is having it ask for higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy. It's kind of a study aid, a partner for students there. So I'm going to go to my next slide. So same notebook LM, but in this use case, this is an auto podcast generator. So next slide. So if you go to Google Notebook LM, you can use the again, notebook guide and auto overview, it'll create a podcast for you for whatever you uploaded into that large language model, Google Notebook LM. So next slide. I know I'm moving fast, but we're trying to get over this material. My last use case is generative AI as a thought partner about misunderstandings. So here I'm trying to identify potential areas of learner misunderstanding. So I actually applied that to this workshop. So my example is a professional development session on generative AI. So next slide. So here my prompt is act like an expert in pedagogy. You're designing a presentation on practical use cases for university professors to give examples of high impact general artificial intelligence use cases. So first, I want you to identify 10 or more reasons this presentation will fail. And second, respond to them with 3 ways to address the failure. So next slide. So the output here from ChatGPT is, hey, here's how it's going to fail. There's skepticism on the value. Professors feel generative AI is irrelevant to their discipline. Generic use cases, overemphasis on technology. So again, here I'm using it to identify how my presentation will fail. Next slide. So here's the responses. So it says, hey, use specific examples, highlight time savings, and use research-backed results. Next slide. So here's my summary. So my lightning round: add generative AI bookmarks to your toolbars, use innovative data sources, use Google Notebook LM perhaps as a study partner, create a podcast, and then use it as a thought partner. So I'll end there. So we have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Excellent. Yes, thank you. I don't see any in the Q&A right now, but feel free for our audience, feel free to plug those in. I am curious. I noticed that in some of your prompts, you ended with the how might I help you do the best job possible in your prompting. Um, how have you found that to be effective? How does the chatbots respond to that? And then I've got a question from the Q&A.
Sure. Yeah, I love to end my prompts with that because it will then help me to focus. Like it'll say, hey, are you talking about kindergartners or are you talking about university students? So like I may have forgotten in my prompt about that, and it will help. It'll say, tell me this, tell me this, tell me this. So I always ask it to help me.
Awesome. And then from the Q&A, why Perplexity?
I really like Perplexity a lot. It is a large language model that gives you references to what information that it's collecting. You can also select which model you want to use. So you can select Claude, you can select ChatGPT, but it has a lot of value in giving you where the references came from. So I like it for that reason.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Uh, Great way to start us off, John. That was wonderful. We're going to bounce from the faculty side to the entrepreneurial side, moving on with Paul.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. So I am going to share the perspective of what AI is looking like from um, like the entrepreneurship perspective. So I'm not an entrepreneur myself, but I oversee several student accelerators. So I'm going to share a little bit about 4 teams in different industry areas, and then one tool that we've used with entrepreneurs that are getting started. So I'm going to go kind of bounce around on this slide with different examples. I'm going to start in the top right corner with a website called Go Zigzag, and a use case that we've been using with this site is we have a lot of students that are ideating different ideas in startups, and they aren't quite sure where to start or even if the idea already exists. And this is a really quick way for students to basically give a short blurb of what idea that they have, and then they're able to get all of this information. So they're able to look at a business model canvas and get hypotheses for validation. They are able to get examples of what a customer persona may look like. So really what it's doing is speeding up the process that students were already doing before by using Google and other campus and library databases to get this information. It's also a very nice way to work with like first-year students, or if we're doing like a classroom workshop, oftentimes myself and my colleagues are invited to join different seminar courses to just introduce entrepreneurship. So this has been a fun activity to really test out like what are all the different components that go into starting a company from that ideation stage. Encourage you all to check it out. You can just go to gozigzag.com, and I think you all will be provided with materials after the session. And yeah, it's really interesting, and there's ideas even that can make our lives easier as administrators and faculty members, and students have shared some of those ideas. The next, I'm just gonna share some, like there's way more examples than these, but I think these highlight different industries. So Semaphore Surgical, the founder of this company was actually a 6th-year neurosurgery resident when I was introduced to him, and then he did one of our accelerator programs. So he himself didn't have the AI skills that were needed to do the product that he is developing. But basically what they're doing is improving operating room efficiency and patient outcomes. And what he was able to do is he knew kind of what he needed from his own experience in the operating room, saw some inefficiencies, and then able to find that computer science and tech talent to build out this product. And that's what I think can be really fascinating about this AI space, is even individuals that maybe they're not skilled, or the individuals that are actually building out the tech, but they know from their own expertise in different areas what could improve and be built with this stuff. And how it works is it is using video and like in the operating room, and the goal is to spot areas of inefficiencies and then better train the surgeons to save money in the operating room and improve patient outcomes. There's a lot more information about each of these companies, but for time's sake, I can answer any questions, or you can review the websites after. The next one is called Coda HX. This is also in the medical space. At Hopkins, a lot of the companies that I come across are in the life sciences and medical space. But this one is also led by a medical student, and what he is trying to do is figure out a way to reduce the complexity and error-prone nature of medical bills. He was motivated from some of his own experience of working with family members of navigating that process. I'm sure many of you on this call have received medical bills and you're like, what are all of these different charges? So they're trying to use a language model to identify, like, are there things that are duplicated or like shouldn't be on there, and the goal over time is to give patients the like equip them with the tools to hopefully lower their medical bills, or just if they can't do that, better understand what why they are being charged certain things. I think another unique thing about this team is the individual, he himself is a medical student, but he does have some coding skills. But being at a school like Hopkins with nine different schools, is able to work with engineers that are studying computer science. And I think that's something that everyone on this call can try to utilize, is like that there's so many different disciplines that can benefit from the ideation side to actually building out the language models to bringing in the expertise for the problem that is trying to be solved. And Semaphore, Coda HX, and then the other two I'm going to mention have all gone through the Fuel Accelerator program. So we also try to connect them with industry mentors and other folks that are already doing this work. But of course, a lot of the AI is just so new that it'll be quite a while until things are perfected. The next one in the bottom left is a screenshot of an iPhone with a bunch of musical notes. This company is called Karaoke, and I think it's really fascinating of how can AI increase access to music students or orchestra or folks that are performing and need orchestral accompaniment. So Crystal, the founder of this company, she's a PhD student with the Peabody School of Music, and what we try to do is or what she's trying to do is she knew that this is a challenge. She shared that it can cost hundreds of dollars to get accompaniment when preparing for various performances and different things. This is a way to kind of have that practice and make it feel like you're with an actual orchestra, but through AI, potentially saving hundreds of dollars for each practice to not have to pay that. And even beyond cost, a challenge with this space is just finding time and space to have these practices, because you can't just host an orchestra practice in any room. You need specific spaces. And yeah, she is also taking advantage of being a student by connecting with the computer science department and other students to really build this out. And finally, I want to present Counsel AI. This is led by an undergraduate computer science student. So she herself was interning at the Baltimore Public Defender's Office, I think 2 summers ago, and saw a lot of challenges and really just caseloads that were enormous for the public defenders in Baltimore. And I think that's a problem throughout the country for public defenders. So she wanted to develop a way that would like lessen the amount of time that lawyers would need to spend in some of the case management. And there are competitors in this space, but I think she is just working to simplify that and allow the lawyers to really focus on time with their clients instead of some of the admin work that takes a lot of time. But yeah, that's about it. Just highlighting the different industries and examples and how students can apply what they're learning in the classroom to many different industries.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. We do have one question already in the Q&A, and feel free to add a couple more. We've got a few more minutes to ask Paul some questions. First off, what was the name of the orchestra app again?
So it's called Karaoke. I'll put it in the chat just because it's spelled like that. And then after the session, you'll get additional information. Actually, each of the founders of these companies shared lengthier blurbs, so then you can check out kind of what they're working on your own after.
Great, thank you so much. We also have another question that just popped up. So there are some examples of how lawyers who have quoted cases that did not exist, kind of the hallucination, the hallucitations. Questions about have those models improved?
That's a really good question. So I think they've improved, but I think they're still not up to par that you can just use that without having a person review. And I think that's really the case with all of these. There's still, like, even Go Zigzag, it's a good starting point, but you still need to do that individual research after, and I think it saves some time in that initial step. But on the legal side, yeah, I would still advise to be cautious. And I think what the founder of this company is trying to do is really have it as like a summary tool for case files at the moment, versus giving suggestions for like next steps with legal actions to really avoid some of those challenges that were happening as ChatGPT was first released.
Great. And I have one more question for you. What level of learner would Go Zigzag be best for? Is it better for a grad student who's not knows a lot more about entrepreneurship, or would this be accessible for a newer student, undergrad, maybe even high school?
So I think it could be both. I think from the earlier student, it's helpful just to see like what should someone be thinking about if they're even curious about entrepreneurship. I think oftentimes, at least in my own experience, I see students think like, oh, the main objective is to get venture funding, but there's so much that goes into starting a company well before that. And so I think it opens an earlier student their eyes to like, okay, what are the competitors? What questions should I even be asking users or customers? And especially at Hopkins with the healthcare space, like generally the user of a lot of products that students are creating are not the individuals that are paying for the products. So there's a lot of teaching and building knowledge of like, well, it's a different conversation with a hospital administrator versus the doctor or patient who might actually be using the product. But as far as a graduate student, I think it's a nice way just to summarize thoughts or ideas, or open up like maybe competitors that you weren't considering or other ideas. So I think it can be used in a broad variety of ways, but I do think it's not like the end all be all. It's really just the starting point to kind of plan out what are the next research steps for your process.
Great, thank you. We have just a quick comment before we transition into back into our faculty examples. Some options for reducing hallucinations, but just kind of being mindful, kind of what you were saying. They will have to be something to be reviewed, not completely avoidable. But moving on, we're going to stick with Johns Hopkins, but move to the faculty realm. We have Carly next.
Hi, thank you. It's really good to be on this panel with you all, and thanks to everyone for coming. My name is Carly Schnitzler, and I am a faculty member in the University Writing Program at Hopkins. You can go to the next slide. And I want to preface my talk here by saying that, at least in the context of teaching writing, language models have created more questions and more problems than they have answers and solutions. But they have also created a number of opportunities to really explore and affirm the value of writing in education and to think critically about AI. Next slide. So something that I recommend doing even before using generative AI or language models in a teaching context is to really think about being really clear about the standards of conduct around using AI or language models in your class. This is an exercise that my classes and I do together, usually in the first week. And we do this with a couple of pedagogical goals in mind. The first here is to kind of begin to articulate the value of writing for their education, for their personal growth, and for their professional development. I start these conversations by asking, why are we in a required writing class when there are these tools that can write for us? And it really creates a good discussion around buy-in and why we're here, and gets students to think a little bit more deeply about their investment in their education and writing as a part of that process. The second goal here is really to kind of establish a culture of collaboration and co-creation in the classroom environment. I don't come in with kind of a top-down approach of like, here's how you will or won't use AI, although for larger classes in different contexts, that may work very, very well. I teach relatively small classes and like to sort of involve my students in the process of co-creation there. And then the third thing, which I think is really important, particularly because we're in like a real Wild West where most, if not all, universities don't have a sort of standard or set policy around language model or generative AI use in the classroom, is really to set clear expectations and guidelines for the use of LLMs in the writing classroom, which are grounded, at least in this case, in the students' own values that they're exploring. So that's kind of like the baseline. That's kind of what I recommend before even engaging in AI use in the classroom. Next slide. The next couple of examples that I'll talk about all come from an edited collection and an open educational resource called TextGen Ed, Teaching with Text Generation Technologies, that myself and two other wonderful scholars in writing studies developed and published the first version in August of last year. The first version is looking at the use of language models and other text generation tools like Markov chains, poem generators, things like that, in a writing intensive teaching context. And since we published this in August of 2023, we have also since published 2 updates to the collection called Continuing Experiments, where other educators have done exactly that, sort of shared exactly how they're using language models and other generative AI and text generation tools in a writing intensive teaching context. And I encourage you all, if you are using these tools in a writing intensive context, consider submitting your assignment to this collection. We update it and we'll publish new versions every August. And I'm the lead editor for that project. So the rest of the examples that I'm going to give come from TextGen Ed and then TextGen Ed Continuing Experiments. Next slide. So this is how I have decided to integrate language models into my own first year writing classroom context. This is a creative assignment called ghostwriting, and it really explores the processes of drafting and revision in a pretty intensive way. The model for this assignment is a personal narrative, and it's modeled off of an essay by Vauhini Vara entitled Ghosts, which she sort of iteratively drafts over 8 or 9 drafts with a precursor of Chat GPT, GPT-2 or 3. And students like do the same kind of thing with a topic of their choosing, drafting and revising their work in tandem, sort of developing a relationship, whether it's sort of a confrontational or adversarial one or a collaborative one with the model as they kind of draft their own personal narrative and explore their own personal voice. Next slide. This study or this assignment is also the subject of a study that I'm currently conducting, thinking about how language models might be used to help students articulate markers of their own personal voice in first year writing contexts. And these are some of the reflections that I've gotten from students as part of this assignment. We can see here that students feel like using language models in a context like this kind of lets them have a little bit more freedom to explore a topic that they normally wouldn't know or feel comfortable talking about. It pushes them to kind of articulate their voice sort of in contradistinction to that of the language models and so on. Next slide. Another example, and this is an assignment not from me, but from the wonderful Maureen Gallagher from TextGenEd. This is all about kind of AI literacy and doesn't directly use language models or other forms of generative AI in the assignment, but instead kind of exposes students to different controversial use cases of AI, everything from environmental impacts to like exploitative labor practices to data privacy issues that have arisen in various contexts with AI and get students to reflect on the sort of like greater cultural context here. It's an assignment that I think is really valuable and worth checking out. Next slide. And then this last one, I think, is a really fun assignment also from TextGenEd, from Josh Anthony's classroom. And it's one that I've adapted for various contexts, especially when you have a really kind of intensive reading assignment or reading discussion day. In this assignment, Josh Anthony asked his students to basically try to get a language model to recreate a reading from class. So you have a reading that you've assigned, and then it's sort of a real prompting experimentation to try to get a language model to reproduce as closely as possible the text that you just read for the class. And this really encourages a lot of deep thinking about the different rhetorical moves being made in whatever piece was just assigned, and thinking through how authors are using language in a really intentional way to get an effect from their audience. It's a really valuable kind of reading exercise. All right, next slide. All right, that's all. I have other resources too. I hope TextGenEd is a valuable resource for those teaching writing intensive classes. It's been a real pleasure to write and be a part of the editorial process there. But that's all. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have about 1 minute if there is a question that might pop up in the Q&A. I guess I'll ask a quick question. How did you initially, oh, here it is. Oh, this is about just in general. Yes. So we will be sending out an email to all of our registrants with the recording of today's webinar. And while we won't be sending necessarily these slides out, we will be sending some materials as well of some follow-up of the information that was shared by each of our panelists today. But Carly, quick question. How did you connect with we'll actually go with this question from the Q&A. I apologize. So do you think prompt engineering is an effective way to teach students about using AI to help with the writing process?
Prompt engineering is a really interesting way of sort of probing the efficiency of of a language model. And so much so that like prompt engineering assignments kind of have made up a new section of assignments in newer versions of TextGenEd continuing experiments. And yes, it certainly is an effective way to teach students about using AI. And it also is an effective way of sort of like thinking critically about the limitations of AI, particularly with such an intensive prompt engineering assignment like the try to prompt a language model to recreate a reading from class, because it will never do it to the same degree of fidelity that like the original author had written it, but it sort of can get close if you are effective with your prompts.
Great. And we are going to bounce to the next speaker. We're going to shift back into the entrepreneurial standpoint and take it away, Henry.
Great. Thank you, Julia, and welcome everyone. I'm Henry Mortimer. I'm the director of the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at the University of Baltimore. Next slide. For nearly 20 years, the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, or the CEI, has served as what we call the front door for entrepreneurship in Baltimore, encouraging and supporting entrepreneurial learning among UBalt students, faculty, and alumni. And so with this open door policy, our center's ongoing goal is to help students and others launch and grow business ventures through events, access to mentors and other resources, and providing opportunities for them to engage and collaborate with the Baltimore business community. Next slide. In other words, we serve as a bridge to help students take what they learn in the classroom and find ways to apply that to what they're seeing in their world, the real world, offering practical experience to building businesses and advancing their careers. And that last part is really what's relevant for today's discussion. So we also serve as a conduit between the faculty and the business community to spark connections that can lead to new applied learning opportunities. For example, we're working with the faculty in the new AI in Business Master's program, which my colleague Mikhail will talk about in more detail. But we're helping them to develop partnerships with Baltimore businesses that will help those businesses solve real problems using artificial intelligence. For instance, having the students and the faculty propose AI-driven predictive and analytical tools to help retailers moving into Lexington Market, into the new Lexington Market, or Harbor Place as it becomes redeveloped. This will allow them to achieve success by forecasting demand, managing inventory, and optimizing pricing strategies based on consumer behavior and market trends. And we are also, working with faculty in other schools in this way as well. The next slide, please. So in terms of supporting students directly, each Wednesday afternoon during the semester, the CEI hosts an open gathering for entrepreneurship students, and most of whom are working entrepreneurs themselves, as well as others who are interested just in the field. And to meet with representatives from the business community, mentors and coaches, as I mentioned, and resource providers, but also successful founders, and help them all engage in a fireside chat Q&A session. And recent discussions, not surprisingly, have focused on how AI can be applied to improve business processes in different ways. Next slide, please. For instance, a recent chat with Jen Fry, who is a local founder of an app called Chordal. She was discussing not only how she used generative AI to help improve the next iterations of the app, and she was showed the students there's the benefits of using the free but also the paid version of ChatGPT. And specifically, she mentioned that it was very helpful in accelerating her proposal creation times, and saw a lot of eyes light up when she said things like, "I can do in one day what used to take me 2 weeks." So a lot of heads nodding and pens scribbling on that. Bianca Jackson, also a local founder of a company called Brick Rose Exchange, which is an award-winning startup. Clients include American Express, Comcast, Meta, and others. They have an innovative use of virtual reality and artificial intelligence And she conducted a workshop about how technologies like VR and AI can be integrated into the business ventures, showing the students how you can use it to focus on relatable topics like video games, content creation, and social media. Again, they were seeing some new ideas that they hadn't thought about in terms of incorporating tech into their businesses. And then fairly recently, we also had a new entrepreneur in resident, Jason Michael Perry. He's a fractional chief AI officer, formerly, with MindGrub, who demonstrated to the students how to use AI to create tools for testing and improving their elevator pitches in sort of a role-playing capacity. And as John mentioned previously, and Jason focused on how figuring out and crafting the right prompt can be very effective, and especially using the advanced voice mode to review and get feedback to their elevator pitch, which they are all in the process of creating as they move through the semester. So next slide, please. And not surprisingly, a lot of these students have already begun to incorporate AI into what they're doing and learning how to move the needle on their businesses to improve not only the processes, but the outcomes in a number of different ways. Fashion designer Tishawn Thomas says she uses AI quite frequently, in some ways at least, to help differentiate herself in the market, exploring how to be more competitive. And she says, though she knows that she will integrate the technology into her fashion business, she is exploring ways that she can start using in terms of role playing, as well as AI enhanced design, smart textiles, or streamlined production processes. So the introduction of the AI to her has opened up a lot of possibilities for how she can grow the business. Next slide, please. Jenny's an e-commerce entrepreneur, selling jewelry as 925 Collective online. And she previously said doing a lot of photo editing for all the pieces of jewelry that she's displaying and selling used to take an enormous amount of time. But incorporating a new app called Photo Room, which incorporates AI filters, she has been able to save a lot of time, which folks is also a lot of money. For instance, batch hundreds of photos in minutes. And then finally, next slide. In the EdTech field, Victoria Achumba uses AI to develop her app called LearnNest, which is an online platform and app designed to connect parents with accredited youth care professionals. And it's been instrumental, she said, in streamlining and enhancing the matching process as part of the platform. She used the AI to actually develop a pairing algorithm that helps match parents with professionals based on a range of criteria. And it's enabled her to provide more personalized and precise matches, which is going to be fundamentally important to the parents, so they get connected to the most suitable educators. So she's able to not only utilize the AI to improve the development of her product, but also it allows her to keep up with trends and get feedback from customers. So she continued to develop what she's doing. Those were the case studies that I brought. I didn't have too much more to add. Happy to take a few questions.
Henry, thank you so much. I'll leave this up for just a minute or so. I don't want to come up with a question and then have a better one pop up in the Q&A. But really, thank you so much for sharing all of those examples. It's really neat to see what exciting things are coming from not only our faculty and our community members, but from our students directly.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. All right. Now, while I'm not seeing any questions pop up here, Henry would be able to answer them while we move on to our last speaker for today. I'm going to stop sharing because we are going to have some examples popped up on the screen from our last speaker, Mikhail.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. You guys hear me okay? I think I might be freezing a little bit. All right, well, Henry already kind of alluded in his presentation that we launched at the University of Baltimore the very first program in the state, not in the country. There are a couple other programs like that in the country, on which is called Masters in Artificial Intelligence in Business. And what this program is meant to do really is focus on how you implement AI sort of in the most value-enhancing way possible in the business organization. So one might ask a question, what is the need for the program like that? Is this just, like AI is kind of cute, it can help us out, but what do you need a program, and what would be the value of the degree like that for myself, right? And we actually believe that right now AI is sort of in the stage where it's clearly a very important and incredibly useful productivity enhancing tool. It's sort of like a great research assistant that you might have if you're a faculty member. And every day we see sort of additional new tools that are popping out that, cuts you out. Something that you would do in a day, you could do now in 30 minutes. And so on, right? So on the margin, it really helps you, it makes your life a lot easier. I mean, I was using AI this morning, and the latest example is Google LLM Notebook. I've loaded like 20 research articles into it, and it produced this wonderful summary that concisely summarize it for me. I don't need to spend a day reading them. And I can also listen to it on the podcast, like while I drive my car for an hour from Baltimore back to Washington, where I live. That's all wonderful and great. But the reality is, one thing that we find out is that AI is actually kind of a tool that's increasingly more used by people with, let's say, with higher levels of education. It's still not, strangely enough, being used by sort of the rest of the society. And I actually I teach an MBA course this semester, and I asked my students in my MBA course in finance, how many of you are using ChatGPT? And very few people actually do. That I was surprised by that. But more importantly, if we really want to get great value out of AI, we need to find ways, companies need to find ways, and businesses, to take it more from a level of this being a really cool research assistant that enhances my life as an academic or as a business person, to use it in much more value enhancing strategic way. And that's where our program comes in, right? So our goal is to take somebody who wants to say, okay, well, how could I implement AI in the organization that will really give it a competitive edge? Not just from this sort of research assistant level, but on a really global level. So let me show you kind of the structure of our program, and hopefully you'll from that be able to see how we are how we intend to accomplish that. So this is our webpage at the University of Baltimore, and you can see MS in Artificial Intelligence for Business. It's a 30-credit program, which theoretically could be completed in 12 months. It doesn't really have any foundation courses, like if you, other than the fact that if you completely lack any sort of prior business knowledge, we may ask you to complete this sort of a MOOC, which you can, online for non-credit. But there's really two kind of components to the program. One is this 18-credit core, which is focused on more technical aspects of AI, just basic programming, Python, and so on. Basically, AI for business, machine learning, and so on, right? So it just gives you technical fundamentals. But what really is the most important thing, I would say, beyond just sort of the technical aspects of it, is the 12 credits of application of AI in different areas of business. So, for example, how do you use AI in entrepreneurship? How do you use AI in accounting, in finance, in HR, in business, and marketing, and so on, right? So in other words, the faculty here are developing courses specifically to show, like we talked about user cases today, which are wonderful, but imagine a user course on just user cases of using AI in marketing, right? The kind of a strategic way, right? How it helps to solve particular marketing problems. The reason why I'm picking on marketing is because that's where you see the most selling uses of it, because ChatGPT makes the marketing professional jobs so much easier. So, that's where you couldn't even do it now. Supply chain, right? How do you use AI to optimize supply chain problems? So the idea is somebody who can get this degree, they can go in and later on in the company and really be like an implementation consultant in those areas, and vice versa. If it's somebody who already knows how to use AI, right? They're a technical AI person, but they really don't know enough about business. And they come in and they can enhance their business knowledge so that they can actually use the AI technical skills to help real business problems. Now, why is this important in the end? Is because I believe AI today stands at the cusp of where internet stood around 2001, 2002, right after the sort of the internet bubble burst. And, you know, at that point, we had a lot of companies kind of like doing internet. A lot of them went out of business because of the tech bubble bursting. But we didn't know that we were standing in the cusp of iPhone revolution, right? The mobility revolution that really completely changed where we went with that, how we, we did our lives. In other words, internet in the early 2000s was this cool tool that people were using, but still sort of we were in this intermediate area where you could kind of be with it, be without it. And then things just changed completely. And I think that, given the amount of money that's been poured into AI, we're talking about billions and billions of dollars. Hopefully, we're at this stage where you really will need to know how AI will make this go from this research assistant to this transformational role. And we already see it. Wall Street Journal talked about, AI autonomous agents. That's the next stage where it will really kind of change our lives on a day-to-day basis. So I hope I interest you in this degree. I really look forward to working with Henry in particular on creating these partnerships with companies. I think that's what really would make, we have an opportunity there, really making it an applied program where where you actually do stuff cooperatively with firms and really solve business problems and use that knowledge. So that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Mikhail. That was really interesting and exciting. I do have a quick question about kind of your experience with the program with this first semester. Which of the courses are you teaching and how has that been going?
The program was only approved like in June, approved by the state of Maryland in June of this past, June of 2024. We're still in 2024. So because of that, we were, kind of late for this academic year. So we're doing a very soft part-time rollout of it, and I think we actually have one of our students on the call. So we're doing this new application courses. They're really going to be rolled out starting this spring and really fall. But what we're doing this year is we're doing we're working collaboratively across the faculty. We're doing a series of meetings as this course is being developed. So we have a good story across all those courses. So they really work together well. And like I said, I'm really looking forward to working with Henry on doing some sort of co-op opportunities with companies. I think that if that works out, that will be a really cool selling point of the program.
Great, thank you. And we do have another question in the Q&A. So are the MS in AI for Business elective courses available to students outside of this particular program?
So they will be available to any of the to our MBA students. We hope we're hoping to create a specialization in AI in the MBA program, where some of those courses will be available as they've been rolled out. So they'll probably be available to some lessons within our masters, some of our master's program, other master's programs like masters in accounting, masters in finance, sort of to the degree that it's relevant to those programs. Outside of the School of Business, that's really up to the whichever program wants to use them. So we're definitely open to a conversation with other programs of they can use our electives to the extent they want to. We welcome students from other schools within UB and outside UB to take our classes.
Thank you so much. I do have I think this is a really good kind of wrap-up question as well, and this goes actually to all of our panelists here today. Any final thoughts on, we presented a bunch of different examples today, but what our students are experiencing are a variety of different expectations that are professor-specific, course-specific, track-specific, department-specific. So any thoughts on reconciling different expectations of student AI use across their courses? Feel free, anybody can chime in.
Can I start since I tell students to use AI wherever and whenever they can. I think avoiding it, or some are some more traditional sort of minded faculty, problems with it. I think it's here, it's not going anywhere, and students need to know, use it, how to use it. And I think in some ways, whether we like it or not, it's gonna transform the way we educate. I'll give you a very basic example. The Google LLM notebook, in sort of in an extreme way, could eventually, like if a student is smart enough to do that and savvy enough to do that, could essentially eventually supplant the need for a professor, because the student can just load the readings into it, and it will produce a wonderful 25-minute podcast, and instead of me lecturing into them. Now, that could be viewed as a very scary thing, but I think hiding our heads in the sand about it is kind of silly. So we really need to re-envision ourselves, our roles as faculty, as we use those tools, and enable students to use them because they need them in their jobs.
Julia, I jump in. I mean, I think it's important for faculty to open the discussion to get the dialogue going. So there needs to be some early discussion in every class to say, hey, here's what's going on. Kind of what Carly was talking about, her method in terms of engaging the students. I mean, that needs to be done in every course because there's great heterogeneity out there. So I definitely say just start by having all faculty have the conversation, open that space.
Yeah, and to jump off of that, I think it's a hard question to answer just because there is no sort of like overarching institutional guidance for the most part, because it is sort of like idiosyncratic, left up to programs, left up to courses. But I think to John's point, like it makes those conversations at the beginning of the semester over making sure expectations are clear, like even more important.
I'll just add that from my perspective, the students are learning it in some ways on their own already. And so I imagine they're bringing it to the classroom. And I think especially my student entrepreneurs who are seeing it being applied in the business community, as I mentioned, by bringing in business leaders who are already implementing it is eye-opening, and I can only see them increasing their desire for it because it's making a difference in the way they run their business and saving money and growing faster. So yeah, I think it's great.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I believe we have one last question. And since several people brought up this tool, definitely Google Notebook Notebook LM has been a nice surprise or an interesting development in the AI realm. But kind of talking about those ethical, security, and privacy concerns, do they differ with Google Notebook LM, or does it kind of fall in line with the concerns about these tools that we've had kind of from the start of this conversation?
I mean, I'll jump in. I mean, my understanding and needs verification and on this is that Google Notebook LM is a closed environment, so that it is supposed to be more secure and more private. So that there are supposedly advantages to using that as opposed to a general large language model. But definitely need to verify that claim. I've heard that in various sessions, but I have not independently verified.
Thank you. And I guess from my experience, I would just, being mindful of what you're entering into any tool, whether you have the permission to do that or not from the original creator, being mindful of intellectual property. But thank you to all of our panels. This was a really insightful conversation. You've introduced some new ideas and new tools to me. I hope that our audience found this to be as insightful and exciting as I did. Thank you all for your time. We really appreciate the partnerships between our three universities to bring this series together and bring so many different perspectives of what our students are facing, not only inside the classroom, but what comes next after the classroom. What is the next direction of their lives, and what role does this tool play in it? So thank you again to all of our speakers. I'm just going to really quickly share our code for our exit survey. If you have the time, please let us know your thoughts on today's session. This helps us structure future webinars in the future. And speaking of which, our next speaker is Dr. Denise Turley. You are able to register for that webinar now, which will take place same time, noon, Eastern Standard Time on December 11th. Without further ado, any final thoughts from our speakers today?
I would just say that I think it's a very exciting time. Very exciting time. This is a revolutionary tool, and I'm just amazed in how much it has evolved in this past year. If you look at the difference between ChatGPT 3 versus ChatGPT 4, it's a night and day in terms of how much it's helpful. So hopefully it can help us solve a lot of problems that we couldn't do before. So
that is a wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our speakers today. We're really grateful for your time, and for our audience, we hope to see you next time. Thank you.